X equals 3 cats. Also notice I'm number 2. What? I don't know.
You don't follow directions. Oh, I see what you did wrong. Playing the squares for those three.
Oh, I had everything on the
Those are a factor.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I really did wrong.
Yeah, you had good practice on completing the square.
Yeah, I know this is 46.
Definitely did.
I tried that too.
That would make a problem. Yeah. All right.
I did all that.
Oh, you got no too? I don't know. I got 6 for the 2 5. I was like,
It ain't 0.
I don't know. But no.
Oh, crap. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a Doyle is.
Yeah.
Is it? Did you
Yeah.
say?
That's not good.
No. I put my stuff in the bag.
I just.
Hey, we got some paper.
I
We got a
know.
notebook.
Yeah.
Like wearing pants. I wore this. My.
Oh, yeah, I didn't get it. It's just like.
I put my dress shirt over it, and then I put it.
Yeah.
I just keep this. I took off my shirt.
All right, 146.
Hey, it's game day for
I just
More-
made a foil the first.
That's how you're dressed up.
Minus the square.
No, it's not this game. But it's a fun game.
There's no way to dress up.
Well, because I
Yeah. She knows. It's at 7.
yeah.
I'm gonna try to
I
go.
would rather put 2 times.
And you guys in circles.
Yeah,
I'm not going to do it. Sorry.
Yeah, and then we started.
There's this thing called homework, and oh, we're behind on top side.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
I was like, this is great. Thing now, I haven't done anything because everything is on the group store, but I can't use the group stuff.
You have to be
No.
Why not?
Just don't.
They never installed it.
No.
You don't have to make your
I can't do anything.
It's good to
I was quarantined.
shoot.
Did you guys
You know, I
did
can install it for you.
you nail it?
I didn't have the lockout browser on my computer. So I did that. Legit. Yeah. Legit went to the files, downloaded it. That is how you do it.
Yeah, did you guys do what? Oh, you figured it out? It's not exactly
Do you know what's going
No, you got the answer.
Adrian, how are you? How far are you?
I got 6 for 3 5. And I got
We'll get big party. Big party.
I don't know. I just have
Got the answer? Got an answer? Does it work? Yeah. Is that a solution? right, there we go.
What could you possibly do in that?
Bad questioning. Bad. I'll blame me. I'll blame myself. Lizzie, don't look at your homework. No, they look at yours. No. Don't take it.
So,
Oh, you even got it. Highlighted, like it. 26, good. All right.
or he said to underline the ones.
That's
ones.
All right, good. All right. Now this is not a solution. It should be no, but a lot of you got some wrong work on there. For that first part, when you square it, a lot of you didn't square it correctly. I want to go through that because if it would have been a solution, you probably would end up getting no anyway on that. So when you're doing this, this goes back to like very beginning. Like, all right, how do you know you're right? Well, you substitute it back in and check it. So somebody gets an answer. They say, oh, it's 5 minus square root of 2. Yeah, this is not an easy one to substitute in, but sometimes you get those answers. You got to deal with them. So we're going to test it. 5 minus square root of 2 squared minus 6 times 5 minus square root of 2 plus 8. Technically, we don't know whether it equals 0. So, like when you're checking it, and I don't get too bent out of shape, we put a question mark above there because like we don't know. All right, a lot of you are doing that first step wrong. How you got to do that? It's not 25 minus 2. Okay, you FOIL it. Okay, it is a quantity squared, and that's how you have to do that. So you have to treat this as 5 minus square root of 2 times 5 minus square root of 2. Now I'm going to go ahead and distribute the 6 and distribute it here. All right, now I want you to take a look, or either mentally or on your paper, whatever. What is it? What is 5 minus radical 2 times 5 minus radical 2? What are we going to get when we FOIL? All right, think through that for a second. And then Justin, you know what we're going to get?
25 minus 5 square root of 2 minus 5 square root of 2 plus 2.
Okay, and then, and then when we're done, you'll get 27 minus 10 square root of 2. So I'll write that down. So you're going to get 25. I'm just going to put, I'll do that. Minus 5 radical 2, minus 5 radical 2, plus 2, minus 30, plus 6 square root of 2, plus 8 equals 0. And now I'm going to combine all like terms. I'm going to go ahead and do it all in one shot. It would be nice to add up to 0, but it doesn't. We got 25. I got a 2. I got a negative 30, and I got an 8, it looks like. So when I'm done, what do I get? It's 27. I get negative 3. Negative 3 plus 8 is 5. And then I get negative 5, negative 5, positive 6. That should be what, minus 4? Square root of 2. Well, that doesn't equal 0. So that means 5 minus square root of 2 is not a solution. Okay. So you need to show me that. You need to get that 5 minus 4 radical 2 correct. Because if you just had 27, if you just made it 27 and you forgot that middle part, then you probably got to look at that one. So just be careful there. And I always like to do that one because this is a common mistake is where you just take a look at that and you just want a 25 minus or plus 2. So be careful there. All right, homework wise. I know I looked at 46 for most of yours. Here's your answers. Check the evens. You already checked the odds. But 22, you got to get negative 1 and 12. 68, negative 1/2 and 1/3. And even if you did like completing the square, like Adam did, because he enjoys that, you got to come up with those answers. You got to simplify it all the way down to negative 1/2 and 1/3, and then negative 5/3 or negative 3/2, or negative 1 2/3, negative 1/2. 42, negative 3, minus, plus or minus radical 2, and yes, you can have it as plus or minus. And 5, 6, plus or minus square root of 13 over 6. Okay, for that one. I do want to do 46. A lot of you, most of you got it right, but I still want to do it. Just so you see it again. And for the ones who didn't get it. Any other questions other than 46? Okay, let's take a look at that one. And let's see here. Is it 3k squared minus 5k plus 1
Yeah.
equals 0?
Mhm.
Okay. Now, I'm only, like, if I had to do completing the square on that, I'm only going to do completing the square if I'm forced to. But we're forced to in this case, so we got to do it. Move the 1 over. Minus 5k equals negative 1. Got to divide by 3. Okay. And if you don't get nice numbers, you got to keep them as fractions. We're going to add something here. We're going to add something there. All right, and that's the hard part. What do we add there? It's not one of those where you more than likely can just look at it and say, oh, yeah, this will work. You got to know that little procedure. Half of the coefficient of the k term or the x term. And I do that by multiplying by half. So negative 5/3 times 1/2. Negative 5/6. Square that. That gives you positive 25 over 36. And we will always get a positive for that one. Always get a positive. All right, now you will factor it. And I said, when you take half that number, that value comes back because when we factor it, it's going to be k minus 5/6 quantity squared. As long as you did everything correct, that number, or half of that number, is what goes into the parentheses. Now I got negative 1/3 plus 25 over 36. That's negative 12 over 36. So that gives me 13 over 36. Take your square root. So square root k minus 5/6 quantity squared plus or minus square root of 13 over 36. That gives me k minus 5/6 equals plus or minus square root of 13 over 6. These should typically are going to be the same, the denominators. So if they're not the same, you got to really double check what you did. Move the 5/6 over. K equals 5/6 plus or minus square root of 13 over 6. If you left it like that, absolutely fine. I know on the other slide I had it written as 2 of them. Doesn't matter. Okay. Questions? Okay, good. All right, we're moving into the rest of 1-3. Still test next Thursday. Okay, so have that on the calendar. Now we got quadratic formula. Yes. You don't have to do completing the square for all of them. All right. Hopefully you got that memorized. You will need it memorized for the test. Quadratic formula, we go back in the sense that we want it to equal 0. Okay, once it equals 0, and that red line means I don't know why it's there. You don't need that. Like, it does not highlighting that at all. If it does equal 0, you pick your A, your B, your C, substitute that in the formula, and just simplify. Okay, life's easy. Now you guys proved that last year, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I probably don't need to prove it for you. You guys will know that from here on out. Perfect. All right, no, I won't take the time to do that. We'll just use it. All right, you're completing the square for that.
Will proving the quadratic formula be on the test?
Oh, you guys already know it, so I shouldn't have to tell you that. You should just remember it. No, it will not be on the test. It will not be on the test. All right. So we good here? You got it? Negative b, opposite of b, plus or minus b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All right, let's just use it. We're going to use it. This will be a rare case where you're just given the quadratic and it equals 0. I mean, because that is something you should be very good at. You'll have other situations where you may need to move some things around. But once all you got to do here is take your a is 2, b is 5, c is negative 7. Plug them in and simplify. For me, the easiest way to remember something is to write it down. So like, even though I've written it down 100 times, I'm going to write down the quadratic root formula each time until it becomes ingrained in my brain or your brain. So even though we just wrote it down, I'm going to write it down again for each one and then substitute it in. Opposite of b. So negative 5 plus or minus square root of 5 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 7 over 2 times 2. I get negative 5 plus or minus. All right, key thing is I want to know what's underneath the radical. So don't skip too many steps. I want to see that. What do you get? 25 minus 4 times 2 times negative 7. Justin, you got it?
Yeah, I got 61.
Oh, we got to work on your math. Double check him.
81?
81. Where'd you mess up at?
Oh, I forgot that 5 squared. I just said 5.
You just had 5? All right, so you had 5 plus 56. Got it. All right, so 5 square root of 81. Do we know what square root of 81 is? 9. So now this becomes x equals negative 5 plus or minus 9 over 4. Do not leave that. I want to simplify it all the way until you either get a whole number or you get a fraction. You should get 2 answers. So I'm going to take over here. I'm going to get the 2 cases are negative 5 plus 9 over 4. And then we get negative 5 minus 9 over 4. Give me their exact values or as whole numbers or fractions. Negative 5 plus 9, that's 4. 4 over 4 is 1. So you get a 1. Negative 5 minus 9 is negative 14 divided by 4. Doesn't come out to be a whole number. Just reduce it. Negative 7 halves. And so I get negative 7 halves, and I get 1 as my 2 answers. You can use a quadratic formula on every problem every quadratic. Does factoring work on every quadratic? No. All right. Without doing any work, without even trying, can anybody tell me whether this problem factors or not? For sure. Do you know whether that factors or not? Okay, don't even try it. Matthew, do you know whether it factors or not?
No.
No, it doesn't factor?
I don't.
Or no, you don't know?
I don't know.
You don't know? All right. So, Katie, do you think it factors? I see you trying to factor it in your head. Don't try to factor it.
I think it should.
Why? It does factor, and there's a reason why. Anybody know?
Because like when we solved the formula, we got like whole numbers and then still have the square root.
Exactly. All right, square root of 81. We know what that is, right? That is 9. If you know that number, if that's a whole number, then it factors. If you get fractions and whole numbers as your answer, you don't have a radical. It factors. Okay? So the rule is, if the discriminant, what's that word? Do you remember that word?
No.
No? All right. I like when you just tell me no. That is b squared minus 4ac. Whatever's under the radical, if it is a positive perfect square, and you're like, well, what's that? Perfect squares, 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49, 64, 81. If it's something whose square root is a whole number, then the original problem is factorable. So you can do a quick test. All right, let me look at the discriminant. Oh, it turns out to be 25. I can factor that. Or I can take a look at the discriminant. It turns out to be 42. Can't factor. Got to do quadratic formula. So it just depends upon the situation. So good, Marissa, is since we got square root of 81 is 9, we could have gone back. We could have factored it. Okay. Not everything will factor though. All right, let's take a look at this one here. (2x squared plus 4 equals negative 5x. All right, now, key thing before you do anything, we got to set it equal to what? Got to set it equal to 0. And then we also want to put it in order, which means I'm going to add 5 over 2x squared plus 5x plus 4 equals 0. And so I got x equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root. B squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Opposite of b is negative 5. And then I get 5 squared minus 4 times 2 times 4. All over 2 times 2. All right, what do we end up with here? Negative 5 plus or minus. What do we end up with? And is it negative 7? All right, negative 7 over 4. Now, one thing here, you got a negative and a radical. I think we talked about that yesterday. What does that give us then? Gives us an I, complex numbers. So we want to pull that out as an I. And so at this point, our final answer will be negative 5 plus or minus I square root of 7 over 4. Nothing else you can do. Now, if you wanted to see if you were right, what did you have to do? Plug it in, right? That wouldn't be fun. But you can do it. Okay. All right, let's take a look at one more. This is more, or one more together. This is more like something you'll see, where you got to do a little bit of work before you can just go straight to the quadratic formula. One, I guess, piece of advice I would give you is I always want my x squared term to be positive. I do anything I can to make that positive. It just leads to fewer mistakes. Can you get the right answer if it's a negative? Yes. Okay, it doesn't have to be, but it just leads to, like I say, just easier to make a mistake. So I am going to move the 4x and the 12 to the other side. I'm going to put 0 equals 2x squared minus 4x. Add to 12. It looks like I get plus 15. And now when I substitute in, the opposite of negative 4 is 4 plus or minus negative 4 squared minus 4 times 2 times 15 all over 2 times 2. All right, what do we get underneath that radical? Dakota, you got that? Yet?
Yeah, under the radical, we got negative 4 squared minus 4. Or,
And you got what it equals in the end, like what the constant
No.
becomes? No? All right, we'll keep working. Keep working. Hayden, you got what's under there yet? No? Oh, man. We're just slower today. It's all right. Take your time. Good. Tony, you got it?
Negative 104.
I think that's right. Everyone else got it? Double check. You got to get negative 104 underneath there. Don't forget when you do that negative 4 squared, it better come back as positive 16. All right, we got to simplify radicals. What I mean by that is, remember, square root of 12. That is 4 times 3, and so we made it 2 radical 3. So you got to simplify that. And so if I got the square root of 20, that's 2 square root of 5. So anything with a radical, we got to simplify. 104 does simplify. Take a second. See if you can figure out what it simplifies to. And since you got a negative, that means there's an I on the outside. I'm just seeing what you remember. And if you don't remember, don't panic. Matthew? What do you think?
Would it be 2I radical 26?
Yes, it would be. You want to see the biggest perfect square that'll go into it? I'm just going to do 104 and worry about the negative later. Okay, I'm typically going to do that. But it is equal to 4 times 26. Okay, and the square root of 4 is 2. So you get 2 square root of 26. 26 is just 2 times 13. You can't get a perfect square into that. So now I end up with 4 plus or minus 2I square root of 26 over 4. Last thing you kind of need to do, take a look at all your constants and see whether they can be simplified. If they all have something, all of them have something in common, then you can divide by that number. Well, what will go into 4, 2, and 4? 2. So you simplify that. And so when we are done, we get x equals 2 plus or minus I square root of 26 all over 2. Okay, for that. So you need to have your radical reduced, and you need to have any constants simplified if they can be. All right, this next case here. This is just I want to just go through this. This is a case of like potential answers you could get and how we simplify those. So let's take a look at this first one. 6 plus or minus square root of 48 over 4. First thing you need to do is simplify the radical. Take a second just for practice. See what you come up with. What's square root of 48 going to simplify to? Carter, any ideas?
Is it 6 plus or minus 4 square root of 3?
It is 4 square root of 3. So I got x equals 6 plus or minus 4 square root of 3 over 4. Now you take a look at all 3 constants. Okay, do they have anything in common? If they do, we can simplify. So you can divide those by 2. And so I get 3 plus or minus 2 square root of 3 over 2. All right, now technically, here's what you're doing mathematically. And I don't even expect you to write it this way, but you need to understand you are really factoring out a GCF out of the top. You're taking a 2 out of there. You're making that 3 plus or minus 2 square root of 3 over 4. And then you're taking these, and then you're simplifying that to 1 over 2. Okay, that's what you're doing, even though you don't know. So you got to watch. Sometimes I see mistakes for something like the second one. Can we simplify the second one? Okay. No, just leave it. Here's what I see people do, though, is they'll say, 10 divided by 5, that's 2. And I'm just going to make that 2 plus or minus 8 square root of 3. That is wrong. Can't do that. That is incorrect. Okay. Now, technically, you could do this. You don't need to. You could take 5 into 10, and that's 2, and then you could write that as plus or minus 8 square root of 3 over 5. But I'd much rather have you just leave that. Okay? Only simplify it if everything simplifies. Okay? Otherwise, go ahead and leave it. I'm not going to mark that wrong. That's correct. This is definitely wrong here. 2 plus or minus 8 square root of 3. Or if just those two divide. All right, so just be careful with that. All right, we've had cases where we've had complex answers and we've had real answers. Those are all going to be determined by the discriminant. So this is one thing that you just kind of need to have a good understanding of. And this comes up a lot. It might either like an ACT situation or like a standardized test, basically understanding how the discriminant affects the solutions. 9 times out of 10, you're just going to find those solutions and then tell me what they are. But I do need to show this to you. B squared minus 4AC is a discriminant. Whether it is positive or negative, and then the third case is a 0, will tell you how many solutions there are. Now, if it is positive, okay, any positive number, 2, 15, 25, you will get 2 real solutions. And technically, they're going to be unequal, which means you can't have the same thing. If you get a negative, for your discriminant, you get 2 complex solutions, which means has an I, which you've dealt with a good bit. And if you get B squared minus 4AC equals 0, you get 1 real solution. Okay. Only 3 things are going to happen. 2 real solutions, 2 complex solutions, 1 real solution. All right, now here's what the type of problem you're going to see. And make sure you read directions. Determine the number and type of solutions for that equation. I don't care what the answers are. Don't give me the answers. All I want to know, and for the number, is there 1 or 2? And then are they real or are they complex? Okay, so what's the only thing you got to look at? Discriminant. Find B squared minus 4AC. So when you see those directions, find B squared minus 4AC. So this kind of tells us 2 things. It tells us the number of type of solutions. It tells you whether the original problem is factorable, which we did before. If you get a positive perfect square, like 36, then you know it's factorable. And you also know the number of solutions. All right, so if I find B squared minus 4AC, I get negative 4 squared. Make sure it's in parentheses. Minus 4 times 3 times 5. I get 16 minus 60. I get negative 44. That tells me I have 2 complex solutions. Okay, for that. All right, so now we had factoring, we got completing the square, we got the quadratic formula, kind of the main ways we solve quadratics. Also talked about the discriminant. You got a little bit of time here. I want you to go ahead and get started. Read the directions. If it tells you to do completing a square, do completing a square. If it tells you to find the discriminant, just find the discriminant. If you don't read the directions, you're probably going to end up doing too much work. I'm not going to look at anybody in particular.